Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is Thursday's Lunchtime with Matt, and I am glad that you're here. And I have a special guest sitting here with me. His name is Chad Stutzman, and Chad didn't recognize that he took the past 10 episodes of what I've been saying and doing, and he brilliantly condensed it all down to 30 minutes. So I invited Chad. Chad is a local businessman who has moved from a career in finance to now shepherding souls and moving people to be on a journey and leading them in that way. So I thought there can't be a better way to have a Thursday lunch than have this conversation. And as Chad and I were getting ready, spoke to him a moment ago about the bigness of how much what we need to do to pursue growth in our own lives, whether it's spiritual in nature, whether it's intentional to aiming you to be a better leader in your home. But on Sunday morning, Chad started his sermon out with this conversation, and he said, ask all of you in the room, raise your hand if you're a leader. And he didn't turn all the way to his right because there was only one hand up over there in the corner, and that was me. But understanding the picture, and Chad said the very same thing that you and I have had in discussion a couple weeks ago, and that was the picture of we're all leading. So with that, Chad, I'm not going to give it any more. I'm not taking your words away from you, but I just want to enjoy a conversation that feeds people as they're at lunch eating right now and just listening in. Sure. And motivates and encourages. So how many leaders raised their hand that day last week?
Not many. There was probably 5 or 6 that raised their hand. Yeah.
So what do we have to do to help people understand how to be a better leader?
Yeah, kind of what I told them is, most people don't raise their hand when they're asked if they're a leader because they think it's a position or place in the org chart or I've got to be leading a group of people or managing some people, and that's not me, And so most people don't see themselves as a leader, but when you boil leadership down to its essence, it's really about influence. Mm-hmm. And so all of us have some level of influence. And, especially if you're a parent, if you're married, if you've got siblings, if you have coworkers, there's lots of influence that you have. And then especially if you're a Christian, if you have a relationship with Christ, you have that influence. You have the Holy Spirit, you have access to God, you have an advantage really with absolutely. Influence. Yeah. And so really bottom line is everybody in the room should have raised their hand. And so we went back to that and more people raised their hand, but not everybody.
The second time, right? Yeah. Well, and I think the connection to influence is then to also shift. Sometimes we think about our testimony, there's positive lights that shine, and sometimes the light's not very bright. It's a pretty dim moment. So we have then also influence of negativity and right. Dragging people down or going opposite. So share with me the picture of where you took us through that conversation on Sunday of understanding leadership, growing in your view of leadership and your desire.
Yeah. So, my passion for leadership really started back, when I was in my 20s in banking. I wanted to become a better leader, mm-hmm. Learned pretty quickly that, influence matters. And I wanted to use it in the right way. I wanted to be a positive leader. And so I devoured stuff, read books, went to seminars, got involved in different organizations, chambers of commerce and right. different things like that, got into leadership positions in a volunteer role even. Mm-hmm. And so out of that came this passion to not only for myself, but for other people, really to help other people grow in their influence, in their faith, their character, their leadership. And, so one of the things that, I think is so important for us to get is that Jesus was by far the greatest leader of all time.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about that. That was one of the points that I'm like, yeah, I brought that up in a past episode too.
And just look at the influence over the last 2,000 years that he has had.
Right.
There's incredible influence there in the church and that kind of thing. It's just grown and grown and grown. So he's the greatest ever. Mm-hmm. And so his model is what we should be looking at.
Right.
And his model was servant leadership. And I think you've been talking quite a bit about that. And that whole idea of serving really starts in your heart. Mm-hmm. You need to have a heart change in order to think that way, because it's not natural.
Right.
Most people, it's look out for myself. I got to take care of me. What's best for me instead of what's best for others, and thinking like, how can I help? How can I serve?
The ladder rungs of climbing the corporate ladder only
Yeah.
have space for one person at a time, which is such a bad view, right?
Yeah.
So how do we help people be free to say, okay, I want to grow. I want to grow spiritually. I want to grow to be a more influential.
Yeah, I think it does start in your heart, making sure that for me, being a follower of Jesus, it's that relationship with Christ that really helps with that.
Mm-hmm.
It develops my character. I start seeing people differently.
Mm-hmm.
It changes your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. And when that perspective changes, now it's not as much about me. There's more of a humility in your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also understanding that you do have influence, that you do matter, that you have something to contribute, whether it's with your family, your kids, whatever the case may be. And so as you get into that, I think that desire grows, whether it's to grow spiritually or just personally to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Most people have that in them.
Right.
Like I want to get better. I want to do better. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better wife or mother, husband, father, coworker, whatever the case may be.
Right. Team member, whatever it is.
Yep.
The thing, I think, the important fact where you said, who are you influencing?
Mm.
I don't think we probably spend enough time really looking at that. Specifically, Keith and I have had that discussion since we've moved to understand our greatest influence right now in our lives. We're aiming between 15 to 20-year-olds.
Mm.
We're getting parents on the periphery of it, but we're aiming at, not just because we have youth that age, but we understand the power of that young adult right now is riding on the coattails of their parent.
Right.
So how do we live in such a way that brings even the question to their mind of like, man, they're different. And we can look at that different as, what is that? The world's different. People like to be different than the world. And I was joking with Jessie last night as we were eating dinner. She's like, yeah, for some reason I started reading the book of First Peter. And I'm like, are you a stranger or an alien yet? And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, we haven't read far enough yet. But to understand that different is, I am different in contrast to the environment, to the society I'm living with. So on that journey, on that spectrum, how do you help aim people? What do you do to move them?
Well, I think you have to get that servant mindset, where Jesus was all about was about serving others.
Mm-hmm.
He even said that I came to serve, not be served. And so it really starts with being kind of,
and that's different than society.
It's different. When you do that, people look at you funny, like, okay, why are you doing that? And so it raises questions, but it also is very powerful,
mm-hmm.
Because when you serve people, they know that you care.
Mm-hmm.
It builds your influence dramatically.
Right.
And if you build your confidence too, because some people are afraid of that because, well, then you get walked over, people take advantage of you, that kind of thing. So you got to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, servant leaders can be the strongest leaders. Jesus was.
Oh yeah. My mind, right when you said that, went right to the definition of what meekness is.
Yeah.
Is not weakness.
Strength under control.
Yeah. And understand that, like, no, I'm a stick of dynamite that's not been lit yet.
Yep.
Don't light it.
Right.
Understand that
right.
Christ had a fuse too.
Yeah, he did. And so I think, to help other people get there, like I said, it starts at the heart, but also your thinking. The head was the next part, as far as how you think as a leader, how you think about your influence, your view of the world, of God, of the other people, that kind of thing. So it's thinking in the lines of, how can I help?
Right.
What can I do to make the world better? What can I do to make my family better? What can I do to make myself better?
Yeah, and it not being self-serving. It's not, I'm doing it to get myself ahead or position myself different, but to make those around me better.
Yeah. And again, coming back to, if you're a Christian, it's wanting to share that good news about what we know to be true. And that's your purpose in life, is sharing that. And a lot of times it starts by serving people, by letting them know you care. And you don't have an agenda, anything like that. You just want to love and serve people. So, getting your heart right, getting your head right, is a big step for influence, for leadership.
Period. Right.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so none of us are perfect at that. We're not going to ever be completely like Jesus, but we can become more like him because of the examples that he gave.
Well, and I think I wrote, as I'm keeping notes for just interview questions, the greatest danger that we have as individuals that profess that you follow Christ. Instantly, you just put the high beams of life on you, and everyone wants to find your failures, right? Everyone wants to find your unsuccessful moments and say, you hypocrite.
Yeah.
So we understand our own danger is to understand then our hands of doing, which you spoke of on Sunday, which to back up, this whole sermon on leadership came out of a greater conversation of become like Jesus.
Right.
So then moving forward, how do we help people understand hands and feet? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the hands is the doing part. You can have the heart, you want to do it, you have compassion, you see things differently, you're thinking differently, but you actually have to do things. Jesus, when he washed the disciples' feet, that was his doing. He was demonstrating, I'm willing to be like a servant or a slave in order to serve the people that I'm leading.
Right.
And his influence actually went up with them when they understood that.
Mm-hmm.
At first there was shock, you're the main leader, why would you do that? But it was finding ways, to like I said, it's kind of getting your hands dirty. Sometimes you gotta go somewhere or do something that doesn't feel great. Maybe there's a sacrifice involved.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes that's the best way to do it. It's one of the reasons I love to go on mission trips with 8 Days of Hope. We're going to a disaster recovery area, very hands-on, fix things, clean things up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way to love and serve people.
Right.
But the hands part is so important because, it's thinking about how can I be a good steward of what God has entrusted to me. A steward is a manager. I think sometimes we think we own everything and we really don't. It's on loan to us.
Right.
We have responsibility. And so whether it's, viewing your possessions that way, if I view my possessions that way, I'm more willing to let someone else use something that I have because it can bless them, it can help them. And then, some people think about random acts of kindness, that's a doing, that's hands, that's looking for those opportunities to bless and serve, especially with the people you have influence with, your family, your coworkers, your employees. That's so important to serve them in practical, real ways that are visible.
In my notes, I pulled up, I kind of freaked out in my iPad, and anybody knows me, I live off my iPad, and I'm like, I have them. I can look at my notes on my phone. Sunday, you talked about several things that I wrote over on the side column, and tied to servanthood is also an understanding of the master.
Right.
And when you love somebody, it's way easier to serve them than the person you hate.
Yeah.
So understanding the role of then, if it's really master, slave, how do I act in obedience when I don't want to? What do you have to encourage somebody with that right now? Not to throw a stick of dynamite at you, but
yeah. I mean, those are difficult situations. If there's somebody that is that you don't have that relationship with, again, I think it goes back to your heart. When you see people, everybody matters.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got a soul that's going to live forever. If you see people that way, you can look past some of the negativity. And honestly, kindness is powerful. And sometimes it's just holding your tongue. Sometimes it is saying something, the truth in love.
Mm-hmm.
So you can serve people in that way. But if you have being a slave means that you're obedient to the master.
Mm-hmm.
And, me as a follower of Jesus, I would view myself that way, that he's my master, and, but he's perfect and in every way.
Right.
He loves me completely. So I'm willing to do what he says and what he did.
Right. As the example of the ultimate sacrifice.
Right. And so when you do that with other people, first, usually they don't understand why. I often get that question when I go on different mission trips, or even just helping someone randomly, like, why would you do this? Like, why would you drive from Ohio to Louisiana and spend a week helping clean up houses?
Yeah, that's nuts.
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Well, it's because, I care about you. God cares about you. You matter.
Right.
And I'm here to help.
Right.
And that opens the door to, like, oh, maybe there is something more to this.
And that goes back to the different than society around me.
Right.
They're just worried about consumed by themselves.
Right.
The struggle that I think so many people have, and there's people who've already turned this off, like they're not listening. You and I brought up Christ, and they're done.
Yeah.
They've alienated themselves from the opportunity to hear about the greatest leader that can actually help them bring change.
Sure.
And I just want to go back to a couple other side notes that I had. I should have warned you my side notes maybe, but you said something about ego on Sunday.
Yeah.
And you defined it as an acronym that I thought, honestly, it made it in my notes. So to me, that hit and registered. I've never heard, I'm sure it's been spoken, but I just didn't register.
Yeah. Yeah.
And talk about how you go back to your own self.
Right.
What keeps you from doing things? What then sometimes maybe is the wrong reason why you do them. It's not loving others. It's not really service over self.
Yeah.
I talked about that last week. That's one of New Camp's main 4 pillars of how they function. And I love it because it's married right into that's who I am too.
Yeah.
But when hypocrisy shows up, right, we're back to ego.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about how you define that, what you do.
Yeah. So ego, like we think of an ego is like, I think very highly of myself, but ego is the, what I would call edging God out.
Right. And that's what I wrote down for the person that's listening. That's what I wrote down. Like, wow. Okay. That's a totally different perspective to come at.
Yeah. And because when you edge God out, you put yourself at the center. Mm-hmm. Like now I'm the most important thing in my world.
I'm now master instead of the servant.
Yeah,
I'm now the ruler instead of the worshiper.
Everything circles around me. And, when you edge God out, then your influence goes down. Most people don't want to be around people that are all about me. Mm-hmm. So that's where humility comes in. Pride and fear are probably two of the biggies that cause us to edge God out. Mm-hmm. Our pride, thinking more highly of ourselves than we should. But humility is misunderstood, I think, by a lot of people. When we humble ourselves, it's not that I'm thinking that I'm not worth anything or mm-hmm. I'm less than.
Right.
It's just thinking about myself less and other people more. So that it's that other focused. And so when you're humble, most people want to be around that. You want to be around leaders that are humble and strong. Which is rare.
Because then other things come along with them. And I think that's probably a really good segue to where you had some things along the lines of habits and understanding, putting other things aside.
Yeah.
You ended speaking with what went to the exact conversation from last week and those talking points. And they weren't because you're thinking this and reading this and I'm thinking this and reading this the same way. I think it goes to the bigness of the synergy of who God is. If you are a leader that leads in humility, you had some discussion points for us to mull over. It's easier to give off adoration. And who doesn't want to serve under somebody that helps them feel gratitude for what they just did, right? Mm-hmm. So as you look at habits, what are healthy habits that we need to be doing as leaders?
Yeah, so habits are incredibly important for leaders. Whether you're a mom or whether you're a CEO, mm-hmm. Having regular habits is so important. One of the big ones that I think a lot of people miss is solitude. Mm-hmm. Getting away from the distractions. Mm-hmm. We are really good at jumping right into the rat race. You wake up in the morning and it's your mind's going 100 miles an hour. It's like, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to get this done by noon. And we're right into task mode. Mm-hmm. And we really start the day too fast sometimes. Mm-hmm. Jesus was great at starting slow. He would spend time in solitude. And so, removing distractions where you can focus. And what that does for you as a leader is it helps you to focus and to think about what's most important instead of all the things I got to get done. What are the important things that I need to address? You know, what's the big decision, or who are the important people in my life? Where do I need to be spending my time and my energy? If you don't have any solitude time, you don't have any thinking time.
Right.
You know, so that one's a big one
for me. The other one's prayer. You know, that's a one that, you know, for me, prayer meditation kind of thing builds strength. It's a way to reduce stress in your life. Every leader has stress, and one of the things that we all have pressure, but stress is how we deal with pressure. And some people are not good at that.
Right.
And so solitude and prayer can really help with that. And then the last one is study. You know, for me, it's studying scripture, but it could be, you know, what are you studying as a leader? What are you learning? You know, because most leaders, if you think you know it all, you're not a very good leader.
No, you're so short-sighted. You don't even know that you're stuck in your own box.
Right. And so leaders that are hungry to grow and learn are the best leaders, because they want to learn from anybody that they can learn from. You know, I've always tried to have that mindset. There might be someone that I might not connect with that person, but I can learn something. So it's that idea of study, setting aside time for that.
Right.
I've got a guy that I've been meeting with, and he's got a book on that I gave him to read, and it's on his desk. And he said he looks at it every day. But he hasn't gotten into the habit of digging into it.
Even if it's 5 minutes, like that's 5 more minutes a week. Not even a day. Just start.
And he knows he should, and he'll do it. But I just think that's, you know, if it's not part of a regular habit, you don't do it. And so those are 3 big ones for me: is that solitude, that prayer, meditation, and studying to get better.
When I don't think people understand the scriptures, prayer without ceasing either. I think they think it's in their closet with their legs crossed, holding their hands, you know, in this very prostrate manner of how to pray. But it really is an ordering of events and surrendering them to me. Lord, I got this going on. Help me figure out, give me wisdom how to handle it. Like the very James 1-esque kind of view of, this is my life before God.
Should be conversational, like having a conversation with God, you know, in your head. I mean, I do that quite often, and sometimes it's more intense. You know, when you're in trouble,
the whys and the question, or the anxious moments.
Right.
The beauty of what I think that we can do is helping people just gain a perspective to start. Like, what's the one thing? And I know we talk about find your strengths all the time, and people that know me well, I'll say, okay, what's your greatest weakness? And they're like, why are you even asking me that? It's not a positive. Okay, keep ignoring it. What's it going to do? Your strengths are already strong. Like, how do you show I got to fix the things that are the weakest and then give myself to those? Because then I'm no longer having casualties. My hypocrisy is not flowing out into that whole understanding of, if I have to act until that person knows how much I really care without me using words. I love, I think it's Jerry Bridges, speak the gospel daily, when necessary, use words. So that your actions are 10-to-1 louder. And we know that it only takes one thing that you've done in a negative comment or slanderous or whatever, just deflated.
You can tear all that away.
All that you've done. And you got to do 10-to-1 to get any traction back. So in the workplace or in the home, whether it's one comment, one look, how to be on guard and how to be prepared for the picture of, I don't want to defame my own God in my journey. How do I do this appropriately? Because it all goes all the way back to your very first question. How many of you guys are leaders? Versus asking the same question differently. How many of you guys are influential? Wow. Then they're like, I got to think about that. I mean, I don't want to be a leader, but I do want to be influential. What's that look like?
Right. Yeah. Well, I like what you said, because, you know, sometimes we can be afraid of making a mistake, but all of us are going to fail. You know, we're going to do things, say things, respond inappropriately, whatever the case
Right.
may be. It's all in how you handle it after that as to what kind of leader you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to capitalize on that with people. If the gospel is a conversation about grace and forgiveness, when I fail, guess what I've done up to that point? I've created the talking points of the fulfilling of what the gospel looks like.
Mm-hmm.
In me needing now to go back and create restitution, or just maybe it's not even restitution, maybe it's just forgiveness and a conversation, and ask for that and seek it.
Yeah.
And the number of times that was podcast number 2, by the way,
Okay.
is to exercise that act of going and exercising humility
Mm-hmm.
for the sake of growing that person, but me being obedient to help them grow and grow myself.
Right.
Because
it's big.
When's the last time American has gone to somebody else that they didn't need to, or mom said, you need to go apologize to them. And they didn't even apologize. They just did it through the motion, right?
Yeah.
The last thing that I have for us, and it goes to a conversation when in John, the woman caught in adultery, and the picture of Christ standing with the accusers and who wants to cast the first stone. This is more of a comment for me, but it goes to your start slow. I've always seen and asked the question, when Christ bent down and was scribbling in the sand, what is he writing? And for me, it's not what is he writing? What is he doing? He's purposely, in his leadership, creating a pause.
Yeah.
Whether it's a control and anger or a moment of reflective thought to how do I say this, laser-like focus. And I think that's sometimes what we miss as leaders, is the clarity to not be right all the time, but then how to pause, say, let me get back to you. And then you circle back. You say, first, let me apologize. I was probably wrong how I did this. And then we're leaving these breadcrumbs of example that we've learned pastorally is biblical, that the world's picking up behind us and going, wow, that's how you do that.
Yeah. I love that illustration too, because sometimes pausing in silence can be very powerful in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just, reacting, Jesus could have very quickly slammed those guys.
Oh yeah.
He could have called them out and, well, you're doing this and you're doing this and you're doing this in your personal life. What do you have to say about that in front of everybody? But he didn't. He paused and he almost ignored them.
Right.
Really
I just bent down. I'm not even looking at you.
Like, you guys are just keep talking.
You don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes as leaders, we have to be able to hold our tongue, pick our moment.
Right.
You use the right words.
Oh yeah. The right words can either set the tone, deflate the balloon, or let it just be magnificent.
Exactly. And that's what he did. He didn't have a long speech or anything like that. He just said, whoever is without sin, cast the first stone.
Have at it, boys.
And then he bent back down and they all went away.
He drew a camel and
Best
did
leader
it have
ever.
one hump or two? And you're like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
I can't express enough gratitude for you joining me for this brief time on a Thursday. Pausing your day in the middle to be between things. But
Sure.
Final talking points as we leave off. What would you encourage us with, or what would you aim us this morning?
Yeah. I think, it goes back to this idea of growth. If you are a person of influence, you want to grow. You want to get better, but not just for yourself, for your family, for the people around you, your relationships. And so I would say, that hunger to keep going, no matter what age you are, how young or how old, if you're still living, still breathing, there's purpose in your life. And so, read a book. If you haven't read a book in a while, there's some great stuff out there. Watching things like this, listening to podcasts, there's so much content out there that's good. Getting that into your routine, getting that into a habit of growing and taking time to grow. Because I've seen so many leaders that get passed by.
Right.
They get stagnant or stuck.
They think they've arrived. They think
Right.
Ego's in. They've just got out.
It's the same way in marriage. If you're married, you're a leader. You have influence, and if you stop working on your marriage, it's probably going to decline. There's probably your problems are going to get bigger.
to the point where there's now you don't even really know each other. So that takes work. It takes being intentional. And so intentional growth is I think a big thing that I'd want to leave with people. Just, keep going.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah.
Ask people for help around you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Chad, thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the conversation, and hopefully we've impacted some people to get to listen to this over the next several days. So thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Matt.
Yep.